Katie.
I'm Annie.
And we did our research on mortality salience and how it affects people's stereotypical tendencies.
So stereotyping, most people kind of know what it is. I'll give you a little basis definition. So stereotyping is the act of people inferring a range of abilities and characteristics that lead a person to believe that all members of the same group share the same abilities and characteristics. However, the focus of our research is more racial stereotype focused, so racial stereotyping tends to favor the race of the beholder while belittling other races. So why stereotypes are harmful? When situations do arise where people do hold those stereotypes, they tend to attribute that information to individuals who fit that profile, even though it may not be true for that certain person. So people do naturally favor others who are like them and have similar characteristics to them, and that's known as in-group bias. And in-group bias isn't malicious, it's very natural. Starting in early infancy, babies tend to favor in-groups. So for example, when a baby sees someone that looks like them, they tend to smile. In-group bias becomes harmful though when the people are constantly presented with information that is negative about certain races. Stereotypes do lead to social categorization, which is a cause of prejudiced attitudes. And the idea of prejudiced attitudes against others has been widely regarded as a self-protective function. And prejudiced attitudes against outgroups, it could be a result of trying to suppress fear that is evoked from thoughts of death.
So our research was, we sought to find a relationship between mortality salience and stereotypical thinking. Specifically, we wanted to look at how treating people with mortality salience would affect their prejudice against 5 races by linking them to stereotypical crimes. So over the course of 2 weeks, we collected data from 133 participants at Fort Lewis College. The age range of these participants were 18 to 24 years old, and it was a pretty even split between genders. So I'm going to quickly just walk you through our procedure here. This was the first form we gave them. It's the mortality salience questionnaire, and this questionnaire was adapted from early Greenberg work and has been used in around 200 terror management theories. The point of this questionnaire is to treat them with the mortality salience, and we were hoping that the individuals that we treated with this would act more in a prejudiced way towards groups. The other half of our participants were just given a control question that asked them about their semester, super general. So the next piece was the stereotypical crime descriptions, and this was the first piece to a 2-part stereotypical tendency assessment. These are just 5 stereotypical crime descriptions with non-stereotypical offenders. So if you look down here at crime number 5, it was an illegal immigration crime in El Paso, Texas, and the offender was a white male. So we crafted these to be very stereotypically biased for a reason. We wanted those who were treated with mortality salience to act in a more stereotypical way and use their stereotypical notions to stabilize their conception of their worldviews. After they read these, they were given 2 buffers, and these buffers acted as a way to let the mortality salience treatment fade into their subconscious. So while they thought they were just doing a simple connect the dot activity, they were actually subconsciously thinking about their mortality. The last part was the actual stereotypical tendency scale. So we gave them the same crime descriptions, but this time there was not the perpetrator description in them. So they had to remember who perpetrated each crime. And we also added these mug shots at the top, and they had to match them accordingly. So going back to the El Paso crime, they would have had to remember it was a white male and match it accordingly. In actually rating our participants, they could get a 0 on the stereotypical tendency or a 5, a 0 being that they remembered all of the perpetrators from the past form and got them all correct, a 5 being that they matched all of the racially stereotypical mugshots with racially stereotypical crimes. So, results, the fun part. We used a 2-sample t-test to analyze our main hypothesis, which was, did mortality salience actually affect our participants? And you can see our probability was at 0.07, just a little bit above alpha, so we could only deduce that it showed trends towards significance. Annie's going to talk a little bit later about the limitations we had and why it wasn't exactly significant yet. But along with this, we wanted to see how our survey affected different races. So Native Americans made up 32% of our participants, and they were also the only race that showed significance in our study. So again, we used another 2-sample t-test, and our p-value was at 0.05, and so we were able to confidently say that mortality salience did affect their stereotypical thinking. This can in part be explained by stereotype threat. This is a social psychology theory that posits when individuals are presented with negative bias against their own race, they tend to perform worse at cognitive activities, and that super plays in. It was a memory test, so that probably affected them a little bit. Based on our results, we can see that the threat of death was transiently reduced for some people who were treated with mortality salience. And Annie's going to talk about some other neat results we found in our post hoc analysis.
So, participants who got the control question were also showing high levels of stress. We think a reason for this may be that we did distribute the study a week prior to the week of midterms, and we did ask them about their semester, so it could have stressed them out a little, and due to that, them having that anxiety about that could have brought feelings of terror, which could be why we found high reports of stereotypical tendencies in the control group as well as the mortality salience group. We also noticed, though, that participants tended to confuse the mugshot of the Native American male and the Hispanic male, which would change how they answer the survey and the study. It could be due to people not being exposed to either the Native American or Hispanic race as frequently. But however, people who do maintain prejudiced attitudes towards certain races have preconceived notions about those people, and they may alter how a person thinks or acts around a certain person of that race. So if someone has a preconceived notion about someone from a certain race and gets certain races confused, they could think or act on those notions to that individual. So for example, it could be as small as like making a rude comment towards that individual, but it could also go as far as not giving an individual a job. So we did find a few limitations when we were doing our study. Time constraint was one of the big ones. We did not have a lot of time, so having more time to gather more participants would have been beneficial for us in the study. Also, having a wider variety of participants would have been helpful. We did our study at a liberal arts college in Colorado, so having a wider range of ages and people from different areas could have made our results a little more valid. And then the crime matching tasks were purely hypothetical, so people could have noticed what we were trying to get at and answered differently, so they were not seeming like they were applying stereotypes to people.
So as for the future of stereotyping, when people feel threatened, they do tend to act more stereotypically. We saw this through our research, and a big place that we find stereotypes is in the media. It plays a huge role in implanting these ideas about stereotypes in our heads. So by changing the narrative in media about how we think about other races and uplifting them instead of demeaning them, we could really change the deleterious effects that we see in our modern world that come from stereotyping. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions?